I'm Jessie, I'm 19 years old. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? I always believed in love, but it hasn't always been rainbows and unicorns. Not every story has a happy ending. Of course, I knew that first loves are rarely happy, but I couldn't even imagine that mine would end up going to the police and revealing a complete scam. My first love's name was Arthur. We met in school. He was really nice and chivalrous. Tried to date me. We were in love, but broke up just after 2 short months. I was deeply hurt and I felt lost. I mean, it's been 4 years, but I still think about him. We broke up because Arthur dove deep into studying, and his parents were against our relationship. His family wasn't really well off financially. His parents want him to grow up to be successful and rich. And in their eyes, I was a distraction. Why did I give up so easy? Very simple. One day he said, "Sorry, but now we can't be together anymore." And just like that, he slammed the door in my face. Hysterical, I ran away from his house. So 4 years have passed since we saw each other last time. My broken heart healed slowly over time. I lived up my life, made plans, and wanted to move to Europe. Until one day when I was scrolling through my Facebook newsfeed and saw a notification about Arthur's upcoming birthday. It's like I was struck by lightning. I went over to his page and started checking out our pictures together. I was overcome by memories and feelings. Have you ever missed your past? I decided to go to our favorite restaurant, ordered our favorite pasta dish, and then I got a call. It was Arthur and he invited me to his birthday party. I was shocked but promised to consider it. I got butterflies in my stomach and my heart was racing like crazy. Arthur said that he's way more mature now, realized his mistakes before and wants to make things right. I agreed because I still had feelings for him and really wanted to see him again. But of course I was afraid that he'd hurt me again. When the day arrived, I wore a stunning dress, put on my best shoes, called a cab, still being worried and anxious, and headed to the birthday party. I saw Arthur right away. He was waiting by the curb. It seemed like these 4 years never even happened. He gave me a hug, and my legs gave way from the excitement. We went inside the house, the music was blasting, and it was very loud from all of the people's voices. I looked at the crowd and was growing uncomfortable, but Arthur put an effort to make me feel at ease. He cuddled me and asked me to go into his room so that we could talk. Arthur was telling me about his time without me. In his words, it was a difficult time. His parents demanded that he had a 4.0 GPA so that he could get a scholarship. He said that he'd be able to get into college and even open his own small business, and that he was thinking about me this whole time. And now his goals were achieved. He couldn't deprive himself of the pleasure of being with me. We chatted for a while about how we'd changed during this time. Then we returned to the party. I kept catching his flirty gazes at me. First time in a long time, I was really, truly happy. After the party, we continued seeing each other, and after a week, Arthur offered to make it official again. His parents didn't interfere with our relationship anymore, plus college was over. We graduated. At first, I didn't want to tell my parents about my relationship with Arthur. I was afraid that they'd be pissed off. They could clearly remember how I was before and my broken heart and state of mind. We were finally enjoying each other. And then one time we were shopping together. Arthur took me to a jewelry counter and offered to try on a ring and earrings. I put the first ring I saw on my finger, when all of a sudden Arthur asked, "Will you marry me?" Of course I said yes. I know how to tell my parents. To say they were shocked from this turn of events is to say nothing. But they had to accept it soon. After a while, however, Arthur changed. I was nervous and thought it was my fault. I begged him to tell me what was wrong. It turned out that his business went under and he needed an investor ASAP. I found out the details and talked about it with him and offered my help. My dad's help, to be exact, right away. I begged my dad to give him money. I said Arthur had problems and he urgently needed a sizable sum of money. He'd pay it all back as soon as he had an opportunity to. Arthur jumped right into work mode. He did complicated calculations and was always busy spending time at work, at his desk. Even when we were falling asleep next to each other, Arthur was talking to himself about something in connection with his business, and I felt a little bit uneasy. My dad agreed to give him the money. That same night, we transferred the entire amount. My dad probably finally calmed down and suggested we have a celebratory dinner in honor of our engagement. And to strengthen their relationship, of course, he wanted to learn more about Arthur. During that evening, Dad and Arthur kept making fun of each other all night long. I looked at them and my heart filled with joy. I thought they really clicked. A little bit later, they were joined by my dad's business partner. Uncle Frank stopped by to give my dad some papers. My dad always treated him like a brother and a part of our family. I loved him like an uncle since I knew him, since I could remember. That's why Dad asked him to stay. He left later that night, though, and my dad took Arthur into the guest room. I went to bed in my own room, but later I decided to check on Arthur to find out about the evening. But he wasn't in the guest room. I didn't really pay attention to that fact and just went to bed. Arthur left in the morning, but in the afternoon, my dad stormed my room absolutely furious. I have never seen him that mad. He said that the safe in his room had been broken into. The money that he was supposed to give today to his partner was gone. Of course, Dad accused Arthur. I wasn't able to say a word when Dad stormed out of my room and called the police. Police searched the house for a long time. I couldn't turn Arthur in, even though I suspected it was him too. So I said that he spent the entire night with me and only left my room early in the morning. I felt awful. How could I be such a fool? I believed Arthur again. How could he be a criminal? I simply just couldn't believe it. I headed straight to Arthur's house and wanted to find out about everything. He was watering flowers in the yard. He was grinning widely and seemed overjoyed. I hugged him first, but then I kept my distance. He asked me to wait for him inside. When I sat on the couch in the living room, I felt there was something under me. I searched with my hand under the couch. Nervously, I pulled out a bag full of money. I was shocked. Despite having certain suspicions, I felt sticky sweat on my forehead. My hands were shaking, and my head was spinning. Money? Arthur? So it was him? I was empty inside. I kept replaying pictures of us together in my head and couldn't believe it. It couldn't be the truth, could it? I called the police and said that Arthur was the thief. It was the hardest decision of my life. I admitted to being in love with an asshole and told myself I just shouldn't hide it. Police arrived the same moment as Arthur was entering the house. He was astounded to say at the least. He looked at me and kept asking what was going on. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. I was pissed at myself for being so trusting of him. The police took the money and Arthur, and I called my dad, sobbing into the phone. I confessed that I lied to him and the police about what happened last night. Arthur was released in a couple of days. He drove straight to my house with the cops. The cops told my dad that Arthur wasn't the thief. The money was the profit from his business, and he was going to use it to repay my dad. My dad looked bewildered. He couldn't accept the news. He shook Arthur's hand emotionless and just patted him on his shoulder. It turned out that Dad's partner stole the money. He'd been committing embezzlement for 10 years. I remember Dad saying that someone close to him was stealing his hard-earned money. Police caught him randomly. His ex-lover who he dumped and broke her heart exposed him. Dad's partner broke into the safe himself, emptying out completely. Dad has been with his partner the entire time he had his business. These news were shocking to him. He trusted him just like himself and always treated him like a family member. After some time had passed from these events, we had a wedding. A band was playing and my dad got drunk and kept hinting about grandchildren. I invited all of my girlfriends. Friends were toasting, saying amazing words. I was so happy. You can't always see the real nature of a person behind a friendly mask and pretty words. But it's not the reason to believe in true love. If you like this story, definitely click and subscribe to my channel. Have a nice day!
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm 18. Have you ever wanted to take your soulmate to a madhouse? I hope you haven't, but I didn't realize until recently that I was dating a real psycho. My boyfriend had not only betrayed my trust, but almost shamed me in front of the entire college by spreading my personal information. Watch to the end and find out how my boyfriend made money on my body, taking advantage of my helplessness. That day, I went to college as usual. The guys were habitually looking at me, and the girls were hissing with envy. This was not surprising, because I was the first beauty of the college, and no one could argue with this. As I was walking down the hall to my chemistry class, I was hailed by Mike, a straight-A student, a loser, and, judging by how many pimples he had, a virgin. None of the normal kids talked to him. To be honest, I had never seen a bigger bore. Mike hesitated for a moment, then took me aside, away from the crowd, and told me privately that Steve, who was sitting next to him in history, was constantly looking at my photo. It would seem that it was not a big deal. Many guys constantly went to my social media pages and liked pictures. The only problem now was that in the photo that Steve was admiring, I was completely naked. I was so shocked that I immediately went looking for Steve. I didn't have to look for long. The scoundrel turned up near the gym. I immediately attacked him, demanding an explanation. I was so angry that I just wanted to tear the brat into 1,000 little pieces. It was only when I noticed that we were being looked at strangely that I slowed down. I didn't want anyone to be interested in why I'd lashed out at the guy like that. Have you ever been the center of a public scandal? Steve tried to pretend that he didn't know anything and didn't understand what I wanted from him, but I managed to grab the phone out of his hands just in time. As soon as I looked at the screen, I almost fainted. What? My photo on the screensaver? I was almost naked there. That was awful. Seeing that I had exposed him, Steve blushed and admitted that he had bought the photo from my boyfriend. It couldn't be. Nick couldn't have set me up like that. Yes, he was a photographer, but that didn't mean he could sell my pictures. I decided to play hooky. I just couldn't listen to chemical formulas when such a nightmare was going on around me. Every minute, more and more of my photos ended up in someone else's hands, and I had to stop it. My best friend and I raced to Nick's house to find everything out. We didn't find him at home. Well, it was for the best. After consulting, Marie and I decided to enter the house through an open window. Maybe we could find the pictures and destroy them. I agree. It was illegal, but it was more important for me to find everything out. We couldn't unlock the laptop and the tablet. We were just wasting time trying to guess the passwords. It was good that Marie noticed the camera. We flipped through the last frames and were horrified. There were just a lot of photos of me that we clearly did not plan to do. I didn't know where they could have come from. I knew for a fact that I had never posed naked for Nick. I didn't see any point in being shot like this. While I was panicking, Marie noticed the dress Nick had photographed me in. Exactly. I wore it to my friend's engagement party and Nick went with me. Oh, and we got drunk then. I didn't remember how we got home. Nick brought me to his place and apparently took advantage of my blackout to do a photo shoot that I would definitely not have agreed to if I was sober. It turned out that he had planned all this. What a traitor! And I trusted him so much. We decided to go through all the pictures just in case Nick was lying not only to me. Our intuition didn't let us down. Among my photos were pictures of other girls. Among them, I recognized Sophie, a senior from last year who all the boys in college were slobbering over. We were so engrossed in studying the photo that we noticed Nick's appearance only when he started yelling at us. It seemed to me that he would have killed us immediately if he had seen the camera in my hands. Nick didn't answer any of my questions, but he managed to pull himself together and just escorted us out of the house. Well, we had to leave. If only we had time to slip away with the camera. After we had ridden a good distance and conferred, Marie and I decided to go to Sophie's. We knew that she had recently taken a job at a summer cafe. Sophie was at first glad to see us, but when she learned the reason for our visit, she visibly frowned. She said that she and Nick dated last year and even lived together for a month, but then they broke up because of Nick's habit of constantly getting drunk on weekends. One day, after a noisy party where everyone had too much tequila, Sophie woke up with a wild hangover and managed to notice Nick near her with a camera. From the characteristic click, she knew that he was taking pictures of her. Sophie wasn't wearing any clothes, but Nick said that this photo was just for him. You see, he liked to look at his beauty. Yes, she wished now that she had made him delete the ill-fated photos. How would you feel if you found out that your ex-boyfriend was a psycho and a traitor? When Sophie found out that the scoundrel was selling explicit photos of exes, she persuaded us to go back to Nick's house, even though I told her that he wouldn't even listen to us. Of course, I was absolutely right. With a rotten smile, Nick said that he was not going to stop what he was doing, and we would never prove anything. He openly mocked us, saying that our photos brought him such a profit that he would soon buy a car. Nick wasn't afraid of being found out. He said that if we complained to anyone or ran to the police, he would print out our photos and post them all over college. How hadn't I noticed before that I met with a sick head? After finishing his vile speech and laughing in our faces, Nick escorted us out and slammed the door. The threat was serious. The girls visibly became sad. Sophie was ready to cry. I didn't even want to think about what our parents would say when they found out about this disgrace. No one would believe that Nick took the photo without our knowledge. It was a good thing that while my ex-boyfriend was yelling at my friends, I stole the flash drive from his desk, which he always forbade me to touch. I took it once, and Nick made such a fuss about it. I had never seen him so nervous. Of course, I was always curious to see what he kept there, but my conscience had never allowed me to go through the guy's things before. I told the girls about the mysterious flash drive. I hoped there was blackmail on Nick, because this was our last chance to save our reputation. When we arrived at the hostel, we immediately inserted the flash drive into the laptop, but it turned out to be clean. It couldn't be that Nick was so worried about an empty carrier. All was lost. Now he would sell pictures until he not only bought a car, but also a house. While Marie and I were preparing for a college-wide embarrassment, Sophie remembered that there was some way to hide files, so we urgently needed someone who knew a lot about computers and who we could trust. I immediately thought of boring Mike. They said he was a computer genius. The honor student was surprised to see us on the threshold of his room. We didn't even notice that it was almost midnight. It was obvious from his shirt that we had lifted him out of bed. However, Mike agreed to help us, and though we didn't really tell him what was wrong, we just asked him to check if the flash drive was empty. Well, maybe he was not as boring as I thought. Mike did some magic on the keyboard, and a few minutes later, we were all admiring nude photos of my ex. It turned out that this lover of nudity did self-portraits. We all burst out laughing, including Mike, who didn't understand. Now let Nick just try to blackmail us. We would arrange such an author's exhibition for him that he would regret the day he was born. The whole city would laugh at him for another 10 years. So that Nick would not relax, we decided to send his photo to his email, demanding that he immediately deleted our pictures. We agreed that we would return the flash drive to him if he destroyed every blackmailable thing in front of us. Of course, we made sure we kept copies of his photos. After that meeting, Nick started avoiding us and then left town. After all this history, we realized that we were too careless and did not think who we were communicating with. Now, we choose our surroundings more carefully, and most importantly, we have lost interest in noisy parties. We asked Mike not to tell anyone what we saw, and thanked him because if it wasn't for him, I would never have found out about my crazy ex-boyfriend's betrayal. Yesterday, an excellent student plucked up the courage and gave me flowers. Well, not the best catch, but definitely honest and sincere. If you like my story, then put a like, subscribe to the channel, and watch this video with your friends.
Hi, my name is Daisy. I'm only 17 and I have already managed to break up with the Prince Charming. Do you believe in destiny? Have you ever tried to predict the future? So, did it come true? My prediction came true, but definitely not in a way as I'd wanted it to. Watch this video till the end and find out what secret my fortune teller kept. I'm a hilarious girl. One might say a hooligan. Have always been so. Fortunately, I'm lucky with my parents. Firstly, they always forgive me everything. Secondly, they are totally rich, so I always have money for my antics. And as for me, I never mind sharing a little of this wealth with my close ones. But this eventually led me to trouble. Last year, I got a boyfriend, Brent, a real Prince Charming. With him, I felt like a princess, even more than with all my parents' money put together. But we were different. Like, very different. Brent loved studying. I preferred to have a good time. Brent kept a healthy lifestyle. I kept having a good time. Brent was a fan of theaters and museums, and I was, yes, a fan of having a good time. Brent had awesome plans for the future. A family, PhD, and an own business. I planned to keep having a good time. Fate brought us together in a cinema on the movie premiere. He craved with a disgust to leave, and I watched it for the third time in a row. Now, I'm not sure that everything was that simple. Maybe that cat was hunting a mouse for a long time and the movie was just an excuse. Have you ever been used by other people? Terrible feeling. It was nice in the beginning. He was so sober and serious, training me stricter than my own father. It came up to me too late that he was interested not in my well-being, but in a way I fit into his future plans. The future mayor cannot have a radical wife, can he? But the re-education process was hard. I was very wayward. If he dragged me to a theater, I dragged him to a shooting gallery or to a picnic in the park instead of museums. This seemed like a real war. But anyways, he was a good boy and an amazing boyfriend. He even had nice relations with his exes. And moreover, my family liked him. Well, my girlfriends had mixed opinions about him, and my bestie Sarah was certainly ready to simmer and hiss from Brent. Life has shown that Sarah was right while others were completely wrong. A couple of weeks ago, a traveling circus showed up in our town. A pretty fine one on a train with the marquees, animals, and its own Laguna Park. To my surprise, Brent did not roll his eyes, saying that circus was a childish entertainment and I should better go to look at a dinosaur skeleton in the museum with him. Maybe he was not so hopeless. Sarah went there with me, and we had a lot of fun on a roller coaster, in a shooting gallery, and around the popcorn tent. Of course, we teased each other. As we were walking past the clairvoyant's tent, Sarah, a convinced skeptic and materialist, began to nudge me and indignantly snort. Well, I immediately decided to spite her a little. Inside of the gloomy and obviously magical tent sat the prophetic Cassandra. Her services were too expensive for a traveling circus, but it was not a big deal to me. I never counted money. The fortune teller was clearly happy about my appearance. Probably only a few agreed to pay that much. At first, I was giggling, not believing myself that I was listening to the ravings of a fake clairvoyant, but then it was not funny anymore. It was like she knew everything about me. My first tripping moment, the name of my favorite children's toy, how Brent and I went on our first date. I asked her about the future, cautiously, with a catch. I'm not a fool like that, to immediately believe everything. Cassandra had something like a seizure, and then she stated that tomorrow, Brent would go to the cinema with me and he would be wearing a red tie. I knew for sure that Brent's plans for tomorrow are completely different and he doesn't have a single red tie. And then Cassandra creepily rolled her eyes and claimed that Brent would die if I were not around him the next day. That was just not appropriate. I shot out of the marquee and, grabbing the perplexed Sarah by the elbow, dashed off as far as possible. Home. On the next day, Brent showed up without a call. He said that he had the first publication in a scientific journal that day, so on that occasion, he was let go off the lecture and was presented with a terrible tie, which he had to wear, and that he was calling me to the cinema to celebrate this. The tie was red. I couldn't think of anything else. Just try to understand me. I could not believe my eyes. The situation needed explanations, and I ran back to that fortune teller. How easily can someone confuse you? A crystal ball and a couple of ridiculous coincidences were enough to catch me. That time, the fortune teller was not even surprised to see me. Allegedly, the spirits had already sent her a vision, and that vision said that only her leadership would lead me to a happy life. Otherwise, a terrible fate awaited me and all my close ones. That is how my new life started. Every day like clockwork, I came to the fortune teller's marquee and got my routine for the day. The first day, I had to go for an important dinner with Brent, otherwise he would choke on a fishbone and die. The second day, a visit to the theater, or Brent would be shot dead by the groom of one of the actresses when Brent would come to give her flowers. To save myself and my close ones, I had to rush around the city with Brent's orders, smile at his friends, go to his stupid exhibitions. I couldn't even argue with him. I fell apart when Brent started talking about having a dinner with my parents. Before that, there was a week of Brent's colorful fantasies about how wonderful a startup he found and how profitably he wanted to invest the money that he had never had. I understood that he was about to pull money out of my father during that dinner. We had a quarrel and I told him to leave. It was my first free evening since the circus arrived at town and I wanted to have a rest, but I couldn't relax. The fortune teller said that Brent and my father would be in trouble if I didn't agree with what Brent would say that day. It was nonsense, wasn't it? And if not? On that evening, I got 2 calls. One was from my father. Someone scratched his car while he was in the office. Another one was from Brent. Brent got into the hospital. Someone attacked him, biffed his eye, and took off his wallet. Well, thanks for staying alive. I agreed to arrange dinner with my parents. I did not try to argue with the predictions anymore. I only counted the days before the circus leaves and my torment ceases. I was sick of the fear at the sight of a tent of a damned fortune teller who brought so much anxiety and headache into my careless life. The fortune teller didn't say this directly, but I felt what everything was going towards. If I did not promise to marry Brent, it would end badly. On the last day before the circus is leaving, I went to the tent as if to be executed. I decided to come earlier to get things done quickly, hazily telling Brent that I had business in the city. I was so tired of saving him during these weeks that I almost hated him. I bent to step into the stinking sweet twilight that had already become familiar, pulled back the edge of the curtain with my hand, and froze. Because I heard Brent's voice. I still had no time to understand anything, but I already got my phone out and turned on audio recording, and not in vain. Oh, I heard a lot of fun things. Cassandra, she had a young, clear voice when she did not wheeze predictions, told Brent that she had earned twice as much off the Fool than she usually does in the season. Brent replied that he would earn even more thanks to the help of Cassandra and her crystal ball. They spent a couple of minutes indulging in memories of the past, how they studied at school together, how they attended the prom together. Brent not only knew Cassandra, she was his ex. Then Brent began to list what other predictions were needed to be made. to convince me to marry him, to stop behaving like a savage, and so that I definitely won't go anywhere, she offered to prophesy him, for example, an accident, and he would take good care to get into it. I got good 10 minutes of incriminating evidence on my phone, which I immediately sent out to everyone. My friends, his friends, our parents. And then I triumphantly entered the tent. Oh, how these two were acting. Cassandra even pretended to have a seizure with visions. But it was too late. I broke up with Brent right there. I predict that Brent will not get money for startups, and he will make no connections in this town. As for me, I don't need any future tellers anymore. Thanks a lot. I will arrange my fate without the help of crystal balls. Enjoyed the story? Be sure to give it a like and stay on our channel. There are many more useful videos here. And be careful with predictions.
Hi, my name is Charlize. I'm 20. Have you ever met the guy of your dreams and fallen completely in love with him, so that it drove you mad? Watch this video to the end and you will learn that even the perfect guy has a skeleton in the closet which he carefully hides. I have a brother, Jim, who is 20. He's my twin brother. We are like two peas in a pod. I study languages and teach French to children for free so that I can practice it myself. I love France and I dream of going there one day and meeting the guy of my dreams. He must be beautiful, strong, so that he can stand up for me and carry me in his arms. Jim works in the field of education. He is a programmer, and now he's writing an app for online lessons. He asked me for help. He needed to test the program. Jim offered me an online French lesson for a colleague of his. When I saw the photo of this colleague, I counted the days until this lesson. His name was Paul. He was 22. He was also divinely handsome, with a well-groomed haircut and fathomless blue eyes. I was totally into him. I was terribly worried before the lesson and prepared carefully. I had never taught an adult, much less a guy like that. How do you cope with your excitement? Are you taking a sedative or doing some kind of exercise? But as soon as the webcam turned on, I was speechless. I couldn't even utter a couple of words in French. I saw Paul on the screen and went limp. Jim started laughing at me at the top of his voice. I yelled at my brother that he bothered me. Paul saw my hysteria, and it made him doubly uncomfortable. So I turned off my laptop and left. I was worried I screwed up. I must have looked like a complete fool in Paul's eyes. I wanted to correct this impression. And when Jim said that he was going to visit Paul to debug the sound in the program and they needed my laptop, I was happy to say that I would go with him. To somehow rehabilitate myself in the eyes of Paul, I decided to look my best. I put on a tight cocktail dress, heels, and makeup. I looked like I was going to a party. When Paul saw me in all this outfit, he was clearly startled. He was smiling more, making eyes at me. While we were checking the sound, I was sitting between my brother and Paul. For some reason, my brother was angry at me and asked me not to be distracted when I openly stared at Paul. Jim began to go at me again, that I was no good at all, that I was just a nuisance. He touched my nerve again, and I freaked out, grabbed my laptop, and ran out of Paul's apartment. I was standing there and crying with resentment, and suddenly Paul came up behind me, put his hand on my shoulder, and asked me to go back. I said that I had had enough of my brother's attacks, and I was going home. So Paul went with me and walked me home. We chatted on the way. Paul was very nice, tried to cheer me up somehow, and even set me a date the next day to make up for today's negativity. I gladly agreed. I didn't believe my luck. So Paul and I started dating. We went to a cafe and he said he liked me and asked me to be his girlfriend. I had been dreaming about this from the very beginning. But it wasn't as rosy as I'd imagined. We were a couple for 3 months, going to the movies, visiting friends. Paul was courteous and handsome, but we never kissed. We just walked around holding hands. I tried to hint that I really wanted something more, but Paul avoided these conversations and it looked strange. Was he really that shy? And he was always talking to my brother about something. It annoyed me that Paul spent more time with Jim than with me. And one day, we all went to visit Paul to watch a movie and eat pizza. He and my brother, as usual, began to talk in secret about something. I said I was tired and would go home. I didn't need someone to walk me home. I would take a taxi. I went to the exit and the guy stayed to watch the comedy. But I didn't go anywhere. I slammed the door and hid in the linen closet in the bathroom. I wanted to watch Paul. After a while, I heard my brother leave too. I was really hoping to find out Paul's secret, and I was interested in seeing him naked. Less than an hour after Jim left, Paul came into the bathroom, and it was incredible as he slowly began to take off his clothes. His body was perfect. Have you ever spied on someone in secret? Paul filled the tub with hot water, filled it with foam, and lay down in it. I kept watching him from the closet. After the bath, he stood in front of the mirror and started looking at himself, showing off his body, stroking himself. I was amused. I couldn't take my eyes off of him either. But then, my jaw just dropped. Paul took a woman's underwear out of a drawer and tried it on. Where did he even get it? Maybe he wanted to trick me. But then I noticed that he quite seriously put on panties, bra, stockings, put on makeup, and came out of the toilet looking like this. I was in shock and I didn't understand what it could mean. I decided to leave before he noticed me and think about what I'd seen at home. I did not expect that such a manly and brutal Paul could try women's clothes on and apply makeup on eyes and lips. I had been thinking about it for a long time. Maybe Paul liked dress-up games. I would have done it for him. The next day, I called Paul and said we needed to talk. Paul was delighted with my offer and replied that he also wanted to talk to me. He came straight to my house. I admitted that I knew his secret, and I understood it was awkward to talk about, but it was still worth discussing. I told him that I didn't blame him for his role-playing and that I was ready to diversify his sex life, and that he could feel free to dress up in women's clothing in front of me. At this moment, my brother was passing by my room, and he looked in at the half-open door and heard all this conversation. At my words, Paul turned pale and fainted. My brother yelled for me to get some water and started to lift him up. When I returned with a glass of water in my hand, I saw a picture that left me speechless again. Paul and Jim held hands affectionately and kissed. The glass fell out of my hands and I was about to run away from all this, but Paul asked me to stay because he never spoke to me. They told me that Paul was actually a transvestite. This was his secret addiction, not just fun or a joke. And Jim was bisexual, and they have been dating for 6 months. And the only reason Paul started talking to me was to cover up his relationship with my brother. I wasn't expecting this turn. I was prepared for any of Paul's quirks, but not for being used. I ran out of the room in tears. I felt like a complete fool. I was so offended by them that in anger I decided to take revenge on them, and I immediately went and told my parents everything. They were very strict with us, and they were not too soft with Jim. They just kicked my brother out of the house and told him that he was no longer their son until he decided to get rid of his addiction. After all this scandal, I sat at home all night, reviewing photos of me, Jim, and Paul. These 3 months were the most exciting and funny in my life. We were fooling around together, having fun, and everything was awesome, no matter what. I missed those times, and them. I felt sorry that Jim was left all alone without family support. And it was all because of me. I told their secret, which they shared with me. I really wanted to fix the situation and almost stop being angry at them. I went to Paul's house and waited for the boys. When I saw them, I immediately started apologizing and offering my friendship and support. I told them that I'd missed them. Paul and Jim looked at me, smiled, and invited me to tea. The guys also apologized. They realized that they were playing with my feelings and hurt me very much then. I started seeing Paul and Jim again, but now they were a couple and I was their close friend. I thought that no one was immune from surprises while searching for their soulmate, because even brutal guys could actually be vulnerable boys. If you like my story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Have a good day and let your loved ones be honest with you.
Hi, my name is Mia. I'm 17. Have you ever argued with your best friend over a boyfriend so that she blocked you and didn't want to see you at all? Watch this video to the end and you will learn how I tried to seduce the fiancé of my close friend to prove that he was a womanizer and how it all ended. I have a best friend, Olivia, who is 19 and about to get married. We were close from childhood, our parents were friends all the time, and we are also now inseparable. I am interested in psychology. I have always been interested in understanding why people act in a certain way. What is the secret of a happy family relationship? How to find yourself in this life? I had a lot of questions, and I hope to find answers to them with the help of psychology. Together with Olivia, we started going to lectures at the psychological club in our town. I read a lot of articles on the internet and shared it with a friend. But then she started skipping classes, and she didn't even have time to read. She met Ed and fell head over heels in love with him. Olivia even stopped talking to me and spent all her free time with her boyfriend. I believe that friendship is stronger than love, but I did not judge Olivia, knowing her romantic and passionate nature. I was curious to see what she saw in Ed. Have your friends ever sacrificed your friendship for the sake of the new guy? Have they rescheduled your meetings, postponed your joint plans, and all for the sake of another passion? And then one day, a month after our last conversation, Olivia called me very happy and said that she was getting married. I was a little offended. My best friend was getting married, and she told me this over the phone, not in person, and I still hadn't met her future husband. But then, Olivia said that the wedding was in 2 weeks, and she wanted me to be a bridesmaid and help with the arrangements. I loved Olivia very much, and I couldn't say no to her. I was happy to help her. We began to choose the place of the ceremony together and ordered a wedding cake from a pastry shop. Olivia really wanted the beautiful memories of the wedding to remain and asked me to find a picturesque place for a photo shoot. I knew a place and suggested my friend to go there, but Olivia was too busy trying on a custom-made wedding dress, so she sent Ed instead. I didn't mind. It was an excuse to get to know him better. We didn't have much time to get to know each other in this pre-wedding rush. I wanted to know what kind of person he was because I was worried about my friend. We went to the coast with Ed and he was very nice and joked all the way. I found myself actually liking him. But friendship was sacred to me. We arrived at the site, took a few test shots, choosing the best angle. And then, during one of those funny selfies, Ed kissed my neck like he was rehearsing a wedding photo. I was embarrassed by what he did. He laughed it off and said that he had imagined Olivia instead of me. I forced a smile, but something inside me skipped a beat. I thought it was strange. I felt awkward. I didn't want to upset Olivia. I decided to finish the photo session and quickly go home. I was uncomfortable being alone with Ed. It was as if nothing had happened to him. He was still sweetly joking and smiling at me. I sent Olivia pictures from the coast, but I deleted that one with a kiss. My friend was delighted with the scenery and thanked me. I was a little ashamed that I hadn't told her what had happened. Although, maybe I was imagining it. Ed was actually posing for the camera, rehearsing a wedding kiss with Olivia. Olivia had to choose a wedding bouquet and decoration of the hall. So we met at the flower salon. When she was discussing all the details with the florist, I decided to go to the coffee shop across the street for coffee. Because it was going to be a long day, I wanted to cheer up a little. As I walked across the road, I looked around and saw couples in love. And I was very glad that many people found their second halves and lived happily. I even envied Olivia for a second that she too had found the love of her life, and I was now practically without a friend. While I was thinking about it, I looked at the windows of the house that had a coffee shop and saw a couple kissing in one of them. And the guy looked a lot like Ed. I went closer to see, and I was right. It was Ed, and he was making out with a strange girl. I couldn't believe that Ed was cheating on Olivia while she was getting ready for their wedding. I quickly took the coffee and went back with the clear intention of telling Olivia everything. She didn't deserve to be treated like this. She had to know the truth. But when I got back to the store, I found her so happy and in flowers. Olivia chose white roses. She said they were a symbol of her pure love. She confessed that she was madly in love with Ed, and if something happened to him and he disappeared from her life, she would simply die of grief. She wanted me to understand her feelings. And instead of turning Ed in, I didn't say anything. I was afraid of breaking my friend's heart, and I didn't know how best to tell her that Ed was a traitor and a cheater. What would you do if you were me? How often have you had to tell your loved ones unpleasant news? I was confused and upset after this situation. I decided to go to my mother for advice. My mother was always reasonable and fair, and I hoped she would help me. My mother said that cheating was a serious accusation, and it was better to check more carefully to see if I was right about Ed before I told her. But there was still a chance that Olivia wouldn't believe it. Love is blind. We often do not notice or do not want to notice the shortcomings of our second half. The next day, Olivia called me again, tearfully asking me to take Ed to a jewelry store in a nearby town. Only there they sold the wedding rings they needed. And my finger was exactly the same size as Olivia's. I couldn't refuse her. But it was hard for me to do it after what I saw. I didn't know how to behave with Ed. On the way, he was unusually silent and thoughtful. I didn't want to talk to him either. Then, all of a sudden, he said that he had seen me from the hotel window yesterday and knew that I had also seen him with another woman. He thanked me for not telling Olivia about it and asked what he could do for me as a token of appreciation for my silence. He said that he was ready to fulfill any whim of mine, even the most forbidden. I definitely didn't expect this. Actually, I wanted to tell her, but I just felt sorry for my friend. And now I saw that Ed wasn't even sorry for what he'd done, and started flirting with me in a brazen way. What an asshole! I was mad at him, but I didn't show it. I had a plan in mind. I said that I didn't blame him for his innocent pranks and was ready to support them. Ed took it as an invitation, stopped the car, and kissed me right on the mouth. I barely managed to turn on the photo mode on my phone and secretly shoot it. Now I had dirt and at least some proof that he was a womanizer and wouldn't miss a skirt. I didn't flirt with him again, and I tried to avoid being close to him all the way. Ed was deeply unpleasant to me. He lied to my best friend and was willing to cheat on her, even with me. We bought the rings. They were very beautiful. Too bad it was all for nothing. After this trip, I planned to open Olivia's eyes so that she would cancel this wedding and not link her life with a traitor. We met at a beauty salon. She was getting a wedding manicure. I decided to start talking about Ed right away. But I started from afar so that I could gradually prepare my friend. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to get married because marriage was for life. And what if Ed was not the right person she wanted and she was badly mistaken in his account? After all, they were so little acquainted and did not have time to get to know each other properly. Olivia looked at me and said I was just jealous. I was offended by those words because I wanted Olivia to be happy and I wanted to save her from a broken heart. She didn't believe my intentions. So I just took out my phone and showed her a photo of me and Ed kissing in the car. The facts should have changed her mind. Olivia saw the picture and burst into tears. I put my arms around her and started stroking her hair, reassuring her that she would find someone better than Ed, that everything was still ahead of her, and this was not the last love of her life. When Olivia calmed down, she looked at me and thanked me for showing my true face before her wedding. Olivia accused me of seducing Ed, called me a traitor, and forbade me to appear at the wedding or in her life at all. That's how I lost my best friend. Olivia demanded that I leave and not spoil her pre-wedding mood and prevent her from preparing further. I left the salon with tears in my eyes. I was so hurt that my friend didn't believe me. We had been through so much with her. I was willing to do a lot for her. And because of some jerk who didn't deserve a hair off of her head, she ended our long-standing friendship. It was my fault too. My plan to expose Ed had failed miserably. Yeah, the photo of me kissing him wasn't the best solution. I looked like a scheming seductress and he looked like an innocent victim. Ed would probably get away with it and blame it on me. Despite Olivia's hurtful words to me, I really wanted to complete my plan. My friend had to be rescued from this freak. He would ruin her life, and I had no choice but to turn to Olivia's brother, Max. He was 20. He'd known Ed longer than any of us, so I doubted Max would take my side. But I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to prevent this wedding in any way possible. I showed Max a photo of me kissing Ed, told him about seeing him in the window with another woman the day before. I begged him to believe me and help me prevent Olivia from marrying this traitor. Max looked at me incredulously at first. And then I told him that Olivia had broken off her friendship with me and forbidden me to go to the wedding. But it didn't matter to me because I only wanted what's best for her, so I was doing everything I could to get Ed out of her life. Have you ever tried to help your friend against his will? Even if he no longer considered you a friend? Max knew what our friendship meant to Olivia and how I felt about her, and he often called us sisters. He knew that I would never wish my friend any harm. So Max agreed to help, but offered to collect even more evidence of Ed's infidelity. We decided to start tracking him. Max said that Olivia and Ed were planning to go to the mall to buy some small items for the wedding. I went there in the hope that Ed would slip up and somehow give himself away and I would take a picture of it. But I was so involved in tracking that I didn't notice when I went towards Ed and Olivia. They saw me immediately. I said hello to them and Olivia pretended not to know me. It stuck with me. She ignored me but forgave Ed, who was really guilty before her,
and smiled sweetly at him. I wanted to talk to her again and explain everything. I missed her and our friendship. And then, suddenly, I got a text from Olivia saying that she would be waiting for me in 5 minutes in the cosmetics department. This both pleased and alarmed me. Why did she pass me with such a haughty air? I ran like a bullet to the cosmetics department to find out. Olivia rushed over there, anxious and lost. She looked depressed. Olivia had discovered Ed's texts with a girl, and they had discussed a lot of juicy details about the previous evening when Ed had allegedly met with friends about a bachelor party. Olivia immediately remembered my photo and what I'd said about it, and she had the general impression that Ed wasn't who he said he was, that he didn't love her and had affairs. But Olivia was afraid to cancel the wedding. Everything was already ready, and she asked me for advice on what to do. I reassured my friend and said that I would support her. I had a plan to expose Ed right at the wedding, as if by accident, and he would disrupt the wedding and make a complete freak of himself in public. This would be a lesson for him. Olivia calmed down a bit, came to her senses, and hugged me just like in the good old days. I missed it so much. I was touched and wanted to get rid of Ed, who had caused us so much trouble. The wedding day came. I should have been there with her, but I had to do it without being seen. So I disguised myself as a waitress. No one ever paid any attention to the servants. Ed didn't see me, and no one could ruin our plan. The moment of the solemn toast and the bridegroom's speech came. Ed went on stage, thanked all the guests for coming, and asked them to open the envelopes in which, according to him, a pleasant surprise was waiting for them. All the guests had such an envelope under their plate, where there should have been a personal message with a wish of gratitude from the bride and groom. But instead, there was a photo of Ed kissing a strange girl, and a printed screen of their romantic texts after a stormy night. I followed Ed for the last few days before the wedding, and I was able to collect dirt that would show everyone who he really was. When everyone saw these pictures, many people began to leave the table. There was a noise in the banquet hall, and someone from Olivia's side even tried to kick him in the ass. Have you ever been a guest at a wedding or other family event, and on one where everything went wrong and the celebration turned into chaos and confusion? I watched from the kitchen doorway. The holiday turned into a family tragedy, and Olivia couldn't stand the tension and disappeared from the crowd. I felt sorry for her, but deep down, I felt elated that Ed had been publicly exposed. He realized what the guests really saw and ran towards the kitchen to get out of sight of the angry relatives of the bride. And then he happened to meet my eyes. He saw my happy face and turned red with anger. Ed realized that I was behind the whole show, that I made it. He came at me furiously as if he were going to kill me. I was even a little confused, didn't know what to expect from him now, and backed away. And then Olivia's parents showed up, and they took Ed by the arm and said they needed to talk to him seriously, and they took him somewhere. I finally exhaled. It was over. My friend was saved. I went home with a sense of accomplishment. I had been very tired over the past week. All of these feelings for Olivia, spying on Ed, development of a plan of retaliation and exposure. I was sleeping it off for 24 hours. I thought Olivia needed some time alone too, so I took a break after the wedding and didn't call her for a few days. And then I decided to dial, but found that her number was not available. I started writing to her in social networks, but she banned me. I honestly didn't understand what was going on and what I had done wrong again. I went to Olivia's house to talk to her in person. Her parents opened the door for me. They greeted me with coolness, not even offering to enter. Her parents said that Olivia was going through a difficult time. She decided to completely erase from her life everyone who had anything to do with this failed wedding and reminded of it. And I wasn't just a reminder.
It all started when I took that stupid photo of me and Ed kissing. And this photo led to the fact that, at the request of a friend, I sabotaged her wedding. She needed time to accept it and forget it, like a bad dream. But how could Olivia not understand that I just wanted her to be happy and helped her as much as I could? I didn't think that my desire to reveal the truth would put an end to our long-standing friendship. I just wanted to protect Olivia from an unhappy marriage with a cheating husband, and I ended up on the list of people who should be erased along with bad memories. After all, I had the right to talk to Olivia. I really wanted her to explain her disregard for me and maybe change her mind about it. I waited for her in the park where she was walking her dog and asked for an explanation from her side. And Olivia said she found out something about me. They'd had a long conversation with Ed after the wedding was disrupted, and he'd confessed, apologized, and said that he wasn't the only traitor and that Olivia should take a closer look at her friend. Ed said that from the very first moment he experienced my equivocal glances. And when I went to the sea with him to choose a place for a photo shoot, I kissed him, and he recoiled from me and said that it was extremely mean. Olivia asked me if it was a kiss. I didn't want to lie to her, and I told her that yes, we kissed, but it wasn't like Ed described. But Olivia didn't want to listen to me anymore. She said she was grateful for my help, but she wasn't ready to keep me around just yet. Olivia didn't trust me anymore. And she was right about something. I hid that kiss, deleted that photo. I didn't say anything. I wasn't being friendly. After this conversation, I decided that I would never again intrude and interfere in the personal lives of my friends, even if they make mistakes before my eyes. My friend has the right to live her life as she wants and learn from her personal experience, make her own personal choices, and not listen to the advice of others. If you are touched by my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good day and let your loved ones always trust you.